The difference with Hawaii and what I explain to investors, that's why they like to do short-term renting because you can't make a lot more, right? And
Hmm.
Hawaii, I've had investors that have sold. In fact, I have a couple of them on the mainland. Hawaii doesn't have seasons. It's booked all year long.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Today's guest began her career within the governor's office, gaining unparalleled experience in understanding Hawaii's laws and regulations, and these play a huge part into the world of real estate. Hawaii creates a very unique set of opportunities and a unique set of challenges. Now, she's widely known for her relentless drive, integrity, and expertise. After years in the industry, she opened Hawaii Development Group. Now she serves as the principal broker, and she's going to share some of her experience, some of her knowledge, and some of her just homegrown feel inside the beautiful islands of Hawaii, but especially on the big island of Hawaii. And what this term means, I really like this term we talked about today, kuleana. And that means bringing something back to the people, bringing something back to the land of Hawaii. Everybody, please welcome Lailan Bento to the show. Well, here we are. As usual, I'm excited to get this conversation rolling. And I think today I get to say aloha, right?
Aloha. Yes.
Aloha. Welcome
Yeah.
to the show, Lailan. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, thank you for your time. Thank you for giving your time and your attention to us and the listeners today. Share a little bit of your unique experience in this beautiful land that you are at and what unique opportunities that presents. So welcome to the show, Lailan.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Lailan Bento. I'm born and raised right here in Hawaii. I am a native Hawaiian and I own a real estate company. We also do, which is fun. We are starting affordable housing development that's going to be sustainable development, something our state and probably many other states in the U.S. have not seen. It's not just building homes people can afford to live in, but also, businesses they can use, medical facilities, all of that. So that's where I'm going right now, owning that company and trying to have the largest affordable housing development in the state. And going to be trying to use that as a showcase for the other islands to follow suit of, we can really do this in Hawaii, which is such a popular state, right? In paradise with the cost of living. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. And that's probably where our conversation is. There's so much to unpack on that idea right there. And the interesting piece on your website, the lailanbento.com, it's LAILANBENTO.com. You mentioned affordable living, and we're going to talk just a little bit about why Hawaii is unique. But in the featured listings down below that, I'm seeing 7-bed, 8.5 bath, 6,000 square feet for $32 million. And we're going to talk about affordable living. That's got to be where the heads bump, right?
Right.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and then 30 million, 29.9. There's some extravagant properties there. But where do we start? Where does your background? Tell us a little bit about your professional background and how you got started in real estate.
I was in hotel sales, selling Hawaii for many years in the hospitality industry. And then my grandfather was a senator for over 30 years in this state. So I grew up being in a political family, which I didn't like so much. And when I was young, I was about 23. I just had moved back from California. He had me work for a former Hawaii governor for 8 years. And that was probably one of my best jobs I ever had. It didn't matter who was in office. I was actually able to help my own people find jobs, help ex-convicts get a state ID and get a job. It was just so much more of helping the community that I went home every day. And it wasn't even about who was in office. It was actually on the front lines, helping people, within my own community. And I took that, knowing all the departments, understanding government, and then I went into selling real estate and helping with nonprofits, helping my community growing up here. being a native Hawaiian, when you're born here, there is something that is instilled in you, which many people don't know. And that is you have to have, there is a kuleana. A kuleana is a responsibility to give back to your community, to teach the next generation and how to take care of this place that everybody loves so much, which is our aina, our land, which is called Hawaii. So that's what, besides selling real estate, I take these profits and I'm working on a nonprofit to educate. And I've also created a scholarship fund to help educate Hawaiian kids with higher education, private schooling, for them to be able to be educated, because higher education is far and none on the outer islands, especially in this state. We have a saying my mom always says, our biggest export is our children. They leave, they get educated, and they don't come back. So that's my mission, is to right now provide housing, to help educate my own people, and to just make Hawaii, where we all live together like we did many years ago on the plantations, all the different races, right? And move it forward instead of just being more of just a tourism dominated high-end homes like you're looking at in the state, trying to find that balance of the middle class not moving away.
Now, is your real estate background, when you started selling real estate, did that start kind of maybe in the lower end, or did you start in the higher end? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
I started on both higher end and lower end. So the thing that's unique about my company is we are going to be launching, it is a luxury development where you can vacation rent. And what a lot of people don't understand, especially investors, not everywhere, most places in Hawaii, you cannot do short-term or transient rentals. It's only a certain type of zoning, certain type of area. So I do get those calls all the time, and people will see an extremely cheap piece of property and you can vacation rent there. Most residential homes, you cannot vacation rent. Our counties, every county is different. Every island is different, but they're trying to, especially since Lahaina also, trying to stop that and just have you vacation rent in the proper resort zoning areas, which I can understand because that takes housing away from the local community, right? If you're just having an empty home in a regular neighborhood and you're vacation renting, where a family that is a nurse and a teacher could live there. So I did start on affordable and then high end. That's what my company does. We're going to be launching that luxury vacation rental where investors are going to have a higher cap rate. It's in the proper zoning. And then we are across the street in the same area, which is amazing. We're going to have workforce housing. That's going to be starting in like the 300,000 to about right under $1 million here. And that is not placed. Many people also don't know this. They think it's the developer that has that with affordable housing. The government actually regulates that. And so when people say cost of living is so expensive and that's not affordable, well, the developer doesn't, come up with those figures. It's based on our government, all the way from the federal government, which is sad because affordable housing should maybe be 150,000, Yeah.
Yeah. And it's definitely driven.
Yeah.
I mean, this is completely subjective and interesting. You came from politics and how much politics drives all of this stuff, especially in the time of recording this, Lailan. We are in the midst of a political race for 2024 presidential candidacy too. And this is a hot topic. I think Hawaii itself, I've yet to come. I'm so excited. It gives me goosebumps to think I will be there. And hopefully my path there would definitely be to learn more about the people, the ways, the culture, because that's so cool about Hawaii. You are talking, I see a couple of listings here, but what island are you on? What's your focus?
We are on Hawaii Island. So Hawaii Island is also called the Big Island. It's the largest island out of all 8 of the islands. And this island is still the most affordable island. You can get a piece of property anywhere, but it just depends on where you want to live. We have 11 of the 13 world climates on this island. So we have a desert area. The mountains will snow. It's very, very unique. But it's expensive, but it's also still affordable in certain areas. So I think since Maui especially has happened, people are starting, and COVID, they were stuck on those certain islands they would visit. So COVID kind of forced them to visit our island more instead of Maui and Waikiki, right? Everybody knows Waikiki on Oahu. Yeah. And once they got here, it's like, oh, wow, it's like old Hawaii, right? These small towns, and it's not overly crowded and all this space, which really was great for people in COVID, right? All that space. They could work from home.
So looking at the Big Island, and you say affordable, if the government sets affordable at 300,000,
Yeah.
what's your typical rent for that? What's affordable rent on the Big Island in Hawaii? Your
We're going to
opinion.
have, there's a project up the hill from us that are 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and that their rent is 2,900. And that's what they're calling affordable, which is not affordable, right?
What's the median? Do you know the median income for median household income on the Big Island?
On the Big Island, it's about only 60, what's about 65,000. There's about 87,000 households on the island. We're short with our current population of about 210,000. So this island before COVID is short about 13,000 homes with our current population. So that's why you'll have grandparents living with the grandkids. It's like multi-generational. And this is before COVID. Hawaii has had a massive housing shortage, and it's because we have the strictest building regulations in the country, worse than California. So to be able to build takes so much time between
Because the weather?
No, or just our government regulations are the strictest to build between county and state. So in most states, you just have to deal with the county. In our state, you have to deal with the state government and the county. So it does take, maybe 10 months to get a permit. It's
Why do you think that they're so restrictive? I mean, what are they trying to gain?
They have what's called the State Land Use Commission, and that came out of when Hawaii was a territory, when we were a Hawaiian kingdom. A lot of our laws came from there. And I understand in a way, they don't want it to be overly developed like the island of Oahu, of what Waikiki looks like. And so what they're trying to do is, I get it. They don't want to overly develop the islands, but it's so restrictive that it takes forever just to build housing, right? We need housing for people to live. That's why they're moving away. And that's why it's so expensive, because by the time a home gets built, right, the cost of it sitting and waiting and the cost of land, it costs a lot of money to just be able to build too.
Yeah, yeah, and the holding costs, and as a developer, I mean, those things just eat you up as the property is not turning income. So I just want to take a quick look at this: 65,000 average median income for the properties for the household there, and that's probably single family household, right? Or is that measured off of the multiple generations inside of the home?
No, that's just one income. And so what you'll see here is people working, mom and dad are working 2 or 3 jobs each. Kids are at home, it's their parents aren't home. Like when I grew up, it wasn't as expensive. My mom was home, but now it's like you're seeing, even young people, they're working 2 or 3 jobs, and that's just to make it paycheck to paycheck to be able to find a rental, or buy a home, groceries, gallon of milk is $14. A loaf of bread is $12.
What? Gallon of milk is $14?
Yeah. So that you have all of that, and maybe you have 4 or 5 kids, right? To sign up for football is $500, not counting cleats. So there's all of this stuff that's expensive, because you have to remember we have what's called the Jones Act. So ships can't just stop in Hawaii like they could before we became a state. They have to go to U.S. ports, and then they come back. So we're taxed twice.
Oh, wow.
That's why, So things aren't driven in, right? 85% of our goods are shipped in. So that's why all of our goods are expensive.
Well, there's so many challenges there beyond the real estate piece. When we talk about affordable living, there's so much that's driving that.
Yeah.
I just want to dive back to this rent thing, because as a investor, as a landlord, we look at income to rent. And when we look at income to rent, it's basically like a lot of the accepted ratios that I see a lot of investors use is that 3 to 1. So my income has to be 3 to 1 of my rent. So if I take that 65,000 and divide it by 12, and then I divide it by 3 to get that 3x, what's going to happen is going to give us let's see if I've got this right here, a number as a landlord that 65,000, you need to make that in order for me to rent you an $1,800 house.
Right.
And you're telling me the average rent is $2,900, the affordable, air quote, for the listeners, is $2,900. There's a huge gap there.
Yep. Yeah.
So if the government is allowing or grants, I don't know how all of that stuff works, but if they're giving grants to make sure they get affordable housing, but yet they're putting affordable housing at a price point where it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
How are the renters going to afford that? Because as a landlord, I'm not going to give somebody the ability to rent a house if they can't afford it.
Right. They're working, like I was saying, 2 or 3 jobs, right? So that income is going to be tripled. just to afford to be able to rent. The difference with Hawaii and what I explain to investors, that's why they like to do short-term renting because you can't make a lot more, right? And
Hmm.
Hawaii, I've had investors that have sold. In fact, I have a couple of them on the mainland. Hawaii doesn't have seasons. It's booked all year long, right?
Wow.
We don't have seasons at all. It's not high season, low season where it may be in the mainland, not here. And then our appreciation is the best in the country. So you might just be making 3 to 5% because the property's expensive, property taxes, high HOAs, but your appreciation value is much more higher than you're going to get on the mainland. I mean, I've seen it out here in the resort area. It's insane. People are making a couple 100,000 year over year. And if they sold, right, the equity is just, and that's because there's not new housing being built. So it just keeps appreciating.
Wow. Wow. And
Yeah.
then with the diversity, you're saying 11 of 13
World
um,
climates.
world climate. That is mind blowing.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the Big Island itself, I mean, there's so much undeveloped land too.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but yet there's that limit, or the volume of housing, I guess, being produced versus the growth of the population. What does the population growth look like on the Big Island,
I think
year
it's
over year?
a year. I think it's about in the last 5 years. I think I read it went up 8%. I know the population is decreasing on the other islands, and that's because local Hawaiian families, they're moving, right? They're moving to cheaper states like Las Vegas, Texas, Arizona, because they can afford to buy a home there, right? They're not working
Wow.
4 jobs in a household. But our island, I think it's because it's more affordable. Our population is not growing drastically, but it is growing. I think I was just reading our county. It has the most building permits right now in the pipeline, and our population is growing, which is nice to see, right? Especially for development and building new businesses. You don't
Yeah.
want a declining population.
Yeah, and I guess the last factor there, when we're looking at either investing in Maltese or developing, we're looking at population, median income to see if it's affordable, and then crime. When we look at crime rates as well too, what does the crime rate look like on the Big Island?
And that's another thing, when I was in COVID, and being from Hawaii, I think I take advantage of, even though it's expensive, the safety, right? The crime is very low here. And
Hmm.
we all know each other. I
Right.
always explain to people, the entire state is like being in one big small town. We all know each other statewide. You're related to everybody, right? You grow up all together, different ethnicities because of the way the plantations were. We
Hmm.
all grew up we all eat each other's foods. It's like riding bikes growing up. You got the Japanese friend, the Filipino friend, and the redhead friend, and your parents all know each other. So it's very, very small, which I find that's the beauty of doing business here. For that. But then I think with housing, it's like, it's taking a turn. And I think this is why I always tell people to vote, because local government, I find, is the most crucial, right? They're passing laws that we need to all pay attention to, and it affects business and our daily lives.
So hard as an investor, get this too. As an investor, I have my homestead, and I may
Yep.
have properties other places, and guess what? I don't get to do in those places where I own real estate.
Do what you
Vote.
want to do.
I don't get to vote.
Oh, yeah,
I only get to vote where my homestead is. So that's
I
challenging
know.
too, which I
It
could
is.
appreciate that, Lailan, because you just think of how many people would be
Yeah.
sucking up real estate in order to buy votes. That's just nasty sounding.
And the sad thing is that I told our county council this, you have over half of them, they're increasing property taxes. And I'm like, half of you live with your parents. So you're not paying property taxes, right?
Right.
But then they're trying to, I even was explaining, I had this friend I had in politics. I said, have you spoken to people that own vacation rentals? Because for many years, that's the middle class trying to, offset their income, have a second home or a vacation home, and then be able to visit it when they want. And then the rest of the year is just covering their expenses, right? They're not having a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. As an investor, I would say they're just trying to buy other properties, and they're the middle class.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's so hard to think. I mean, middle class in that price point, but yet still making I don't know the
Not enough
income ranges,
income,
but
right?
yeah, 65,000. I mean that
Right.
that may be middle class when you can buy a house for 100,000, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And then the cost of groceries, the cost of living in general is so much higher as well too.
Yeah.
So I have a nationwide real estate acquisition company. We were doing this quite a bit where we were, spending a lot of money in marketing.
Yeah.
And we actually came across the property that was right around Discovery Harbor.
Okay.
And it's on the south side of the Big
Outside of
Island.
the Big Island.
And it's kind of like, it's just so far out there. And it's interesting that we talked about the short-term or vacation rental pieces because that
Yeah.
was our first thought to go with that for this property. But if that's not in that type of zoning, which it sounds like, I mean, this is just a residential home, it's
Yeah.
unlikely.
And I always explain this to people, if something is really cheap, in Hawaii being one of the most expensive markets in the country, all of us local people would be flocking and buying it first, right? If it
Yeah.
was such a deal. And a lot of parts of Hawaii, you can't get water. You're on what's called water catchment, right? That the water tank on your property, you can't get electricity. So when people call and they're looking at certain developments, I'll explain the first thing I check is their water, because you're going to spend a lot of money trying to build a well or you're going to buy land and then to grade it, because we have volcanic blue rock, might be more expensive than the land itself. So there's all of these factors I was trying to explain. If some property is really low, there's usually a reason, like you were saying, it's far from everything.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. This particular property is a residential home and there's somebody living in it already.
Yeah.
Interesting enough on that one, the tax pieces, the taxes are so far behind and it hasn't been repossessed. Do you have any, or foreclosed on, not repossessed, but
Yeah.
do you have any experience with the tax policies when it comes to being foreclosed or not being foreclosed?
I know if it's a tax sale before, because Hawaii is a non-judicial state. So I know before, when, we had the recession, there was a couple of attorneys that found the loophole and were actually somehow giving the people that lost their homes back their homes or getting them paid for it, even though they hadn't paid in years, right?
Yeah.
A couple of things I know before in tax sales, it depends. Now I think the insurance companies are opening up again, but it's a case by case basis. They will not give in Hawaii recently. And if it's a tax sale, title insurance, right? So you can't get financing, and it really makes the property not really valuable unless you find a cash buyer that's willing to take on a home that doesn't have title insurance. And then in Hawaii with taxes, our taxes don't pay into our school system. Our property taxes go to the county, and the state general fund pays into the Department of Education. So that's why our taxes are a little bit lower, you'll see, with property taxes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And as far as rentals go, what type of returns have you seen that investors would shoot for? I mean, with this huge gap in property value versus income, versus rent, could you even come close? Is anybody even concerned with the 1% rule if we're looking at that much appreciation?
Out here, so what you're going to do is you're going to pay more to get a higher cap rate. Out here in the resort area, we call it the Kohala Coast or the Gold Coast. You're going to pay a premium for it. That's where your appreciation is going to go up the most. That's because it's clean, gated restaurants, white sand beaches. You're going to be able to vacation rent. And then if you decide to sell it. So out here, you're looking at a cap of 3 to 6%. I am launching a development that you're going to get a 6% cap, which is phenomenal for out here. Yeah.
What was the name of that
share
coast?
That development too. That development is going to be 310 more homes, 70 condos out here in the resort area.
What was that area that you mentioned there?
That's going to be what's called Ainamalu, and that's in Waikoloa Beach Resort. Phase 1 was completed a couple of years ago, and now we're going into phase 2. And I can email you information.
Yeah. And would that be on the west side of the island?
Yes.
Okay.
So where all the white sand beaches, restaurants, hotels, 24-hour security. I mean, families, you'll see them riding bikes and exercising on the streets and walking to the beach.
And the white sand beach is very interesting because there's so much black volcanic rock, right?
Yeah.
But then there's white sand beach. Like, it's so crazy how that happens.
And then south, you'll see some areas that have green sand beaches on the island, black sand beaches.
Yep.
Yeah. And then there's only a few white sand beaches. They're on this side of the island, which people like to go to.
That is amazing. So your development projects then are even the affordable housing projects that you work on,
Mhm.
affordable neighborhood projects you're working on, are those build to sell, or do you do anything build to rent?
We're going to do both. So build to rent and then also build to sell. And hopefully our goal is the people that start off renting that they're able to buy right into a home. Because that's how you would want them to progress in life instead of
Yep.
just, because a lot of times you're just going to see families that just have been renting for 20, 30 years, right? To try and
Yep.
find something they have a really good deal renting. And yeah.
And then what about Section 8 out there? Do you have any knowledge or experience with that program?
Section 8, there are a couple of developments. There's actually a couple of new ones that are doing Section 8 housing. There's been private corporations and then the government that stepped in to do Section 8 housing. And I was just speaking to the head of housing for the county. They have a ton of applicants. I mean, people are looking for just housing, right? That qualify for Section
Yeah.
8. Yeah,
That's a huge challenge. So I have a little bit of experience in that as well too. And the one thing that intimidates me or scares me is, yes, I want to help people, but I can't change people. They have to want to change. And when we
exactly.
create these opportunities, not everybody there is going to want to change. So what we have the potential of doing is consolidating problems when it
Yeah,
comes to personal problems, emotional problems, mental problems, all of this stuff that kind of tags along with the lower income
right.
type.
I agree.
So it's a risk when that happens, and it's so difficult because you want to give back. And I love what you said earlier. I'm going to try to say this: Akuliana.
Juliana, yes. And
Akuliana.
I know what you mean about the Section 8 because Hawaii, I don't know what state you're in right now, but Hawaii is a landlord, tenant state. It's a tenant state. So
Yep.
in COVID, I had homeowners in tears, families not paying for a year and a half. And what was happening was to get them out, they were getting bonuses, $5,000 to $8,000 to get out so that these homeowners could actually sell their properties before they lose their properties, right?
Right.
Because I cover multiple mortgages at a single mom, like in tears. She could not get them out. And because we were in COVID, the courts were closed and they were open. Families are just hanging out, a year
Hmm.
or two, and landlords could not get them out and they were living for free. And I had a couple of families that were, at the risk of just going into foreclosure because they could not, they had used all their savings to cover the mortgage in COVID. So I know what you
We
mean about that side of it too, right?
Yeah, and we experience that often. A lot of what we own is in landlord-friendly states as opposed to
Tenant,
tenant-friendly states where you had
right.
mentioned there. And the difference, for some of the listeners that may not know the difference, sometimes it even comes down to red and blue states. The laws that are passed are going to be friendly towards one or the other.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody a story. One of the first rentals that I ever bought, I made every mistake possible.
Yeah.
Bad location, bad buy. And then as I started holding it, I didn't know how to screen tenants, and I was just used so badly. But that
I
experience,
agree.
Lailan,
Yeah.
was huge for me because I was in court trying to get money from somebody who agreed to pay me rent, but then they didn't hold up to their side of the agreement.
Right.
And the way I was treated in that courtroom was mind blowing. I will never forget it. And
Yeah.
from that day moving forward, understanding, even in the states where it is landlord friendly, we still have people who take advantage of the system, who take advantage of um, niceness. Well,
Yeah.
they underestimate your meekness for weakness, if
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
In the idea of helping, but when people take advantage of the system, it's rough. So
Yeah.
how do we? It's a
I
huge
know.
question.
It's
How
like
do
you
we
get
overcome that?
penalized. Yeah, you're penalized, right, for doing the right thing, and it's like, what? Yeah.
Hmm.
No, I know
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, what you're talking about there, because it was mind blowing of how people their behavior, and you're right. The landlord was like the bad news bear, right? And it's
Yep.
like they're getting prosecuted, and they're trying to do everything right. They're even trying to work with the tenants, maybe a payment plan. They were just like
Yep.
they knew they could get away with it as tenants, and they just milked it, and it
Yep.
was just sad to see. I remember my mom and I cleaning homes and paying to have, companies who had to help haul away their stuff. They would just leave it however they wanted to. It was
Yep.
just like, wow. I
Bad
know.
tenants have got to be the largest producer of waste in landfills. And, I was recently in Memphis, Tennessee last week, and just anywhere where something can be dumped, it was dumped. And it's just
Yeah,
what that does to the systems, increased costs. Now property taxes are going up because
right.
of certain individuals. And again, we want to help people, but we can't help the people who don't want to change. So
I
it's
agree.
it's a
Yeah,
huge struggle, but I guess we continue to fight forward and push forward because
trying to. Hmm.
if we get through this and we help that one person, that who can then pay it forward, and
He's
maybe
the
they help
chance.
one,
Yeah.
maybe two, 10, 100 people. You never know when you're saving that person that creates, a drug that saves the whole world kind of deal. I
Yeah.
forget I think it was a president who saved somebody who ended up creating that medicine, help people with colds or flus. But
Right.
just
And
pressing forward because it's gonna be tough. Go ahead, Lailan.
yeah. And that's why I think a lot of investors, majority of them, they look towards vacation renting. And when I ask them, it's your same story, right? They are just scarred from a bad, tenant situation where they want to make sure, or they want to ensure, hey, if I buy an investment property, that I'm not tied to the vacation renter, right? Tenant. They're in one day, out the next day, instead of like going through the court system and 9 months later, the home, the person's still living in their home. So I've heard those stories so many times of they're
Yeah.
just scarred going through that. And how does it work in Hawaii? Will they get out after their vacation? Like, yeah, they will.
We gotta
Yeah.
go back home and work
Yeah.
in order to pay for that vacation, for
Yeah.
sure. So much to break into on this, and there's this interesting conversation because so much of it has to do with politics.
Yes.
And but then everybody's got an opinion, everybody thinks they have an answer, but when you look at a macro perspective, it's much
Yeah.
more difficult than any of us could ever comprehend. Even if it's coming down to a $14 gallon of milk, we say,
Yeah.
oh, do this or do this or don't drink milk. There's more to it than that.
Right.
And unpeeling the onion, getting back that 6 or 7 layers, what's causing this. Ultimately, real estate is going to keep growing.
Yeah.
And it's going to keep appreciating. It's going to keep generating revenue. And in such a beautiful place as Hawaii, what would you tell the listeners out there who maybe have the chance to invest in Hawaii, or maybe who want to move to Hawaii?
They can go ahead and Hawaii is always going to be, and if you look historically, even when we had the Great Recession, Hawaii is a solid investment, and people that have invested here, they don't sell, or if they sell, they're buying on another island. They're buying around there just because of the appreciation. I hear it time and time again I think that because it's beautiful, safe, and your investment is going to appreciate. And I think that people like that we are part of the United States. So if something was to go awry, we're in part of the United States, right? It's not like a third world country or anything, but Hawaii has always been a solid investment. Even in the recession, we may have dipped, but that $1 million home was not all of a sudden 100,000. It was probably 850. So I hear it time and time again, and usually starts with an investor just investing one home. I have a gentleman that is in his 30s. He owns banks out of Los Angeles. He started with one vacation rental, and now he's on 13, and he's selling 17 out of California and pushing it over here into vacation renting. And I said, well, why would you do that? And he said, because it's a solid investment. There's not a dip in, people don't question paying the higher rates. They like it. They stay longer than they do in California just because it's expensive to get here, right? So families aren't here for a day or two. They're here for at least a week.
Yeah.
So,
A week, 2 weeks,
yeah.
3 weeks.
And moving here, Hawaii is a beautiful place. People are actually genuine. You'll get to know everyone. It's one big small town. That's the beauty, I think, of either doing business or investing here.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm always excited. The listeners probably get tired of hearing me say I'm excited, but I love it. And it's definitely on our to-do list. One more question for you before we turn the listeners loose here was, if you could go back 10 years and you had set beside somebody maybe on a similar path to you, just getting started into real estate or kind of taken into that direction, What was something that you would tell that person with the knowledge you have now, and you were able to go back 10 years to tell that person?
I would say I got into real estate almost a little over 10 years ago, to not be afraid. Even starting my own company, even now being on developments. I mean, it was always a dream of mine, but there was so much late nights, early mornings, free 99 work and sacrificing. And just, I think 10 years ago, I was, when you have an opportunity, you work for it. And then when it comes, you're scared. And I feel like I would tell myself, when you're scared, that's the time to jump, right? Because you've worked for it. But I always would feel like, are you sure? I think I'm too young to do this. I'm a Hawaiian girl. I don't know. Usually corporations do this. I just started questioning myself because I started to get scared. And I always tell myself, when you're really scared, because I even see that with clients, right? The timing might not be the best, but that's the best investment, right? But it wasn't their perfect case scenario, but it turns out to be their best investment. It's like the timing can always be off. And so that's what I always tell myself. And I would years ago. Who cares what anybody thinks? If you have that right feeling and you're scared, jump, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's done well for me with being that scared. And after I get in, I'm like, why was I so scared and worried? Yeah.
That's great advice. Jump and don't look back. I mean, look back in order to learn, but don't look back and live in the past. Don't live in the fear. Don't live in the problems. Learn from them. And if you need to, make that 1 degree pivot and keep rocking and rolling, because you put in the time, you put in the studies, just keep pushing.
Yeah. And I think that that's the best. I was just telling somebody this. If one word, right, for business, for myself, I would say is pivot. I mean, you have to pivot these days. You have to do everything. You're not just selling homes. You're all of a sudden need social media, doing emails, blogging. I mean, you have to pivot with the times in business to keep up and to keep growing. I think that's a perfect word.
Absolutely. And using that small pivot, that 1 degree pivot, is you're leveraging all of your experience, all of that time that you've already invested. And if you go to a major pivot, then you're starting over, and you could be losing some of that potential. To throw a wrench in the sprockets here, sometimes you have to drop everything you're doing because you're doing the wrong thing. Hopefully that's not the path. Your website is interesting. It's got some absolutely gorgeous places, and then you also have a link to get over to another website, to the Hawaii Development Group there as well too. So everything the listeners need to know, want to know, and able to connect with you is at lailanbento.com. LAILANBENTO.com.
Yes. And I'm in the process of redoing all of that right now. November 1st, we'll have a whole new website. But if they have any questions, they can call or even email me is fine too.
Beautiful. And then the number that you want, we can put it in the description of the show. What's the best number to reach out to you at?
808-936-1800.
808-936
1800.
808-936-1800. Beautiful. Well, thank you for your time, Lailan. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you. And thank you so much for sharing your experience of the tying between real estate and politics and cost of living, all in a place of beauty.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And to the listeners out there today, thank you for your time and your attention. If you have any interest in Hawaii, this is the person to connect with, Lailan. Just a natural. I mean, because she's lived there. It's her life. The island, she knows so much about it. So if you even, she would probably appreciate a call just to say, hey, I'm coming to Hawaii. What can we do? Can we learn more? Where should I go? So reach out to Lailan. Until the next time, this is the Real Estate Mogul MD.